I don't know. Is it Mághnuis?
Mághnuis.
Katharine.
It's
Mághnuis.
but it's just a long A.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is kind of frame where you're at now in terms of the Athenry School of Music. And then I know there's a very interesting story that gets to that point.
Yeah, sure.
And so to kind of put in context what you're doing now, I also want to talk a little bit about kind of teaching methods and your teaching philosophy. So there's probably a lot in the current, but I do think that the journey to where you're at now is also really, really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So where are we at? We are in the middle of a solo concert week in which there are 42 teachers and about 500 kids all presenting a solo this week. So we have 23 concerts over 6 days.
So this is Athenry School of Music, which is in...
Athenry, it does what it says on the tin.
Athenry in Galway for anyone international that's listening. So you have 42 teachers.
42.
42.
Yep.
500 students.
Individuals, probably about another 150 in orchestras and choirs.
Every genre of music?
At this stage, yes. So we have a nice traditional department, classical, and getting into brass. This is the last area that we're getting into. Percussion, vocal, academic, orchestral, choir, some jazz online, with my son in Berlin. Yeah.
What's your role?
My role now,
your title.
My title now is CEO. So essentially, Helen Farrell and myself set up the school 17 years ago, and it went through various different aberrations of legal structure. And a year ago, we gave away all of our instruments and all of our assets. We formed a trust. So essentially, I have a board of directors to whom I report, and they guide policy and governance and all of that, and it's a CLG.
What's that?
CLG is a company limited by guarantee, which means that nobody can take a profit. So if there is a profit at the end of the year, so it's a not-for-profit, it's a not-for-loss as well. You have to, there's a way of running something that you've got to be tight about your budgeting and careful. But essentially, we bring in fees, we pay a teacher, you've then got a surplus, what do you do with it? Okay, or you don't have a surplus because you've got rent and insurance and things like that. But it's looking at collecting, €702 a week and going, what can we do? But it won't go to a person. I'm salaried,
So the first day, like when you started 17 years ago, I mean, clearly, I imagine you didn't envisage a CEO and a board and legal structures, and I mean...
No.
Would that have put you off?
Terrifying.
Because it sounds awful.
Resistance. So initially, we set up a partnership, myself and Helen, and we were teaching Leaving Cert. We had, I had 2 classes, and then I met Helen, with whom I went to college, on Patrick's Day, 2005. And I just had my 3rd son, and I said to her, I've set up these classes. I intend on having another child. This is bananas. Would you, in that nebulous future, do my maternity leave? And she said, yes. Literally standing in a parade. And 2007, she came in and she did do my maternity leave. And when I was looking at her notes, when I was sort of coming back at Easter time, sort of January to Easter, and I went, oh, hold on a second. They were the best preparation notes I'd seen. She'd got a relationship going with the kids. She'd got a relationship going with the parents. She knew who needed extra help. She knew who would be forgiven for being late. She did a soft start. Nobody's being criticised walking into the room. Everybody's welcomed. And I went, okay, come here, you. We want to look at this. And I had some private students in Chum. I had some students that were based in O'Namore with different teachers. And I said, there's no orchestra in the area. Let's pull these kids together. And we set up, I was director of Music Matters in UN at the time. And we set up a sort of sister school initially. And then it just got too big to be an affiliate or a sister school. It wasn't. And we actually, February 2007, we set up Athenry Music School officially. But we did initially have a board because we had a constitution that was not for profit the whole way through. And then it slowly grew. very organically that a student of mine, Helen O'Donoghue, who now lives in New Zealand, so Helen Fahy, came in. She'd done a music degree. Kevin Brett came in. He'd been in college with us in guitar. Una Lanagan came in, who'd been a student of mine, also had done a music degree. And the five of us started that year, and it just was a buzz. And it was when you teach music in isolation on your own, you always come across a kid that your methods don't work for. And I wanted to set up an environment in which we knew that we didn't know. So I've got this kid that I'm trying to teach her spiccato, and my 6 ways of getting her that aren't working. You know?
What's spiccato?
That's just a staccato. It's off a little bit of bow strokey stuff. You turn your arm and the bow bounces for you and stuff like that.
Oh, bow bouncing.
Bow bouncing, yes, with control. Instead of ricocheting.
You have to give it folky terms.
Yeah. Right. Instead of ricocheting around the place. Dug, 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 dug. And I wanted just that atmosphere of how do you do it? Because there's always different ways to do it. And it's like all your methodologies are like a rolling ball, that some of them that you knew have rolled into the dark. Somebody needs to push the ball for you. You know, that sort of... So, but we also had this lovely perfect storm. Katharine Baker set up Cool Music in Gort the year before us. Music Matters was out in Loughrea. Hugh Kelly was starting to work in Galway, and we cooperated. We talked to each other. So there was no concept of a competition. There was a concept of things being greater than the sum, or the sum of the parts, and that we shared teachers. So it meant we could bring people from the University of Limerick who'd done the Masters in Classical and get them to come up to Galway, because there was a meaningful amount of work. That worked incredibly well. Katharine did an orchestra festival for 10 years that we always got to play in. That pushed our orchestra. You know, it was just, it's a perfect storm.
I mean, clearly you want to work because people need to earn a living.
Bingo.
And you're in music, so you're working in music. But it sounds to me, and having spoken to you before, that you're very child-centered. As in, you're doing it from a place of teaching as opposed to, I'm going to build a business that's going to make me a lot of money.
We set it up as a school because if you set it up as a business, you sell things to people that they can't handle or they don't need. So now I didn't understand this at the time. My stepson is in marketing, very high up within 3. And when I explained what we do, he went, just, darling, that's a long sale. And you go, what? Educationally, if somebody asks us to enroll their 3 children, we will take the eldest, not all 3.
Okay, explain all that to me a little bit more.
1, the eldest should be allowed to be the eldest. So he's the pioneering sibling. They have to work harder at everything. The second guy, who's the slipstream sibling, me, just floats in the background. It's like the little yellow jumper in the Tour de France, and chunk, they'll go ahead of the first kid. That's not fair. That's 1. 2, the parent. There's an emphasis on, why do we want our children to do this? Is it that we are making musicians, or is it that we're allowing a child to develop? So we teach children. We happen to teach them music. That's what's going on. So we emphasize with the parents, it's nothing to do with talent. Talent is an exhaustible source that if you don't feed it, you get a 4-year-old that comes in and they're lovely and stable and they can concentrate and their gross motor skills are developed. Okay, God has been generous, the genetics have been generous, their environment is rich. But if you don't feed it, you'll get a 12-year-old who suddenly finds everything hard. So you get to about grade 6 by the time they're 12.
Why does that happen?
It happens because they haven't made things concrete. So if you do a skill, you're not doing a physical skill. You're actually making pathways in the brain. So that when you, the easiest way to describe it is when you learn to tie your shoelaces, you've got 2 hands involved and you're across your coordination paths, so your central line and your tummy. Okay, so you've got to work this way. And when a child initially learns, they do 10 separate movements about. So it's like, oh, and it takes ages. Like we're going to school and you're going to 10 minutes to put your shoes on. Hence everybody gets Velcro. Don't get Velcro. Get your kid laces. When our brain does the same movement, the same way, maybe a couple of 100 times, the brain will go, this is exhausting. I'm popping from this side to this side. And it actually builds a motorway that combines those movements, and it means the child can tie this shoelace and tell you, I forgot to do my homework, or I forgot to do my spellings, or that's in your body. So when you watch a trad head and they're playing a tune and they're having a conversation, or they're saying the next tune name to the person, that skill is assimilated in.
I've never learned that skill.
Yeah.
Keep going on, because this is fast.
Okay.
This is
so when you set a kid up, and I'm teaching violin, and I pop them onto geographically the nearest string, and their arm is down, and we do a little tiny da 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 da. So busy, busy, stop, stop. I want them to be able to do that and tell me how many fingers I've got up. Okay.
So they're just they're not using their left hand.
They're not using their left hand for a wee while. Duck, 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 duck. Stop. Roll over. Neat, lovely, efficient. You're doing the least possible thing, you know. And you find your A string neatly, and then you change your angle, and obviously, and you're using a big muscle here. Now that's Suzuki technique, but it doesn't. It is about getting it into the brain.
Okay. And what's you holding up your hand then?
Because if you can talk to me at the same time as doing it, it is in your brain. If you stop, then we need to do it more.
So this is a test that you do?
It's not a test. It's a part of a process.
That's not an exam.
No, we don't test our children.
Okay, yeah.
It's weigh the pig or feed the pig.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're weighing the pig all the time, you're not feeding it. Don't test.
Okay.
That's stopping your process.
But so you got a kid, and they're doing this
I'm really
busy,
tempted
busy.
to fix your bow hand.
They're doing this,
Bow hand,
Katharine.
no.
Busy, busy, stop, stop, and you say, how many fingers am I holding up?
And they keep going. If they've got it in their brain, they can do 10 of them and go 5.
So it's a gauge for you. Is it?
Yes.
Not a test for them, but for you, as a teacher.
It's a gauge for me to know, have I done enough repetitions of that thing to allow the child's brain to grow the path.
Okay. Did you learn all of this stuff in college?
I didn't learn it in college. I learned it. I did Suzuki teacher training.
Okay.
So it's quite extensive. Essentially, there are 5 levels. I have got level 3. I would like to go back and do level 4. So level 1 deals with everything to do with posture. It is all the setup from the child's feet all the way up. And it would deal with D major, G major, independent fingers, fluidity, get your left hand to work before your right hand.
What age are we talking about?
Me or the kid?
Kid.
51. 2.5, 3. Once they're dry at night.
Can a 3-year-old play the banjo?
No, it's too heavy.
Yeah. So I've, in the past, on rare occasions, and actually recently, have experienced a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old who wanted to come for lessons. Their parents wanted them to come for lessons on banjo. Okay, so the kid had, the granddad plays. And we goes, no, we got to go to Enda and get the proper technique, right? And I'm like, well, for starters, anyway. And so what I have discovered, I didn't discover it, observed, but I've never understood the mechanics as well as what you're describing. It is that the child will play the D string. Okay, down, okay, up. Now, and of course, this is the mistake that I make, which is now put your first finger on the 2nd fret. And as soon as they do that,
everything goes.
Hand A is gone. And I'm like, now press the string. Right? And so I would have always had, come back to me when they're 9. 6 is too young to figure. But what you're saying is that I should just have them playing the 4 strings and enjoying that.
Our job is to find how to repeat something enough with variation that they don't get bored.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? So stick your tongue out. Put your left leg out. Get mummy to stick her tongue out. Sit in a different chair. Get up. Come back.
All of this while doing busy, busy stuff. I like that now.
It's literally variation. But parents do it all the time. how many iterations of the word mummy do you need to say to your baby before the child actually says mummy?
I don't know, they say dada first, don't they?
Yeah, I know that. Do you know why?
Oh, I read this somewhere recently.
Go on.
Oh, I can't remember. I read lots of things.
I know this is an intuition, is that in general the mum is the major carer. And they don't sit there and go, say mummy, mummy, mummy. They go, oh look, daddy's home.
Yeah. Because they are one with the mother.
Yes.
They don't even see the mother as a separate entity.
It's the easiest phonetic to do. Da or pa is easier than mum.
Yeah.
Okay, it's about 3,000 iterations, I think.
Okay.
Right? And then you look at the conditions under which the child wants to get it right. So you have a baby that's maybe about 8 or 9 months and they're doing all their garbling, which is developing their soft palate and all of the phonetics that they need. And then they do an approximation. Mum, mum, mum. And the reaction is, oh my God, come here. Anybody in the house is round that child with this lovely wide open face, you know, that Desmond Morris talks about as one of these universal expressions, you know, wide eyes, wide, say it again. Yes. So you get this massive positive reinforcement and no criticism. They aren't actually saying the word. It's not right.
Mm.
And then we give them the model. Yes, mummy. Do that. You can take that and use that analogy or that teaching methodology or that teaching philosophy for mathematics. You can use it for music. You can use it for anything. You can use it for learning how to drive. It's that positivity, parental involvement. And if a child was slow to speak, we wouldn't stop talking to them.
Mm.
We'd work out different ways to do it. So we'd read to them. We'd have the radio on. You know, we'd be making, you know, phone granny there, video call granny. We'd be working out variations to encourage our child to do it.
Fascinating. So just to go back to the 4-year-old who has all of God's gifts, but that then hits a stumbling block at 12. What's happening?
Okay, so mixed analogy. Little backpack full of steam. Okay, so they arrive and their little backpack's full of steam. If they don't feed it, they use it.
Okay.
Now you've got a flaccid backpack. So lots of different analogies. If you have cling film, it's what happens with the grade system is possibly a way to do it if the grade system is used in exclusion as a teaching syllabus, which it's not designed to be. So the kid learns 3 pieces a year, okay? But the 3 pieces don't contain the entire technique that's needed. So you have a child that's about grade 4 and they find one particular bar in a piece extremely difficult and they never really get it. Okay, what we should have done was take the skills within that bar and taught it about 2 years earlier so that by the time they get to that piece they shouldn't have any difficulty with the piece that they're doing, which is a lovely experience if you go, here, you can play that, because we've done the preparation. So essentially, if we do it so we've got this cling film across and you've got a pinhole of a lack of understanding. Okay, now pile something harder on top. What happens is you pull the cling film, now you've got a gaping hole. So the child finds it hard. The child's reaction to finding it hard is to stop. Okay, or they can't pile another skill on top. So until they go back and reinforce this stuff, you can't actually grow this from. So it's why you'll get a 12-year-old who's playing about grade 5 and you'll get the 18-year-old doing their leaving cert playing exactly the same pieces. You know, or a child does grade 3, goes on to grade 4 and you say, hey, you've got to play for granny. They can't play that piece. I want an accumulative repertoire the same way as we build vocabulary. You don't forget the word mummy when you learn helicopter. You don't forget your polkas.
Polkas are terrible.
Oh, polkas are really hard. As a traditional musician who came into the tradition as a 20-year-old, polkas are the hardest thing to play.
So did you start as a traditional musician?
No.
Started in classical?
Mm-hmm.
Were you good? Did you work hard?
I taped my scales.
You taped your
I
scales?
taped my scales. My mother would tell me to go to my bedroom and I'd put the tape on. I'd read a book. So I must have done them once.
You tape them and then play them over and over?
I taped them onto a cassette.
So that you didn't have to practice?
Yeah.
It's genius.
It was terrible.
It's genius.
Sorry, Mum.
I love that. I thought you taped them as in you were so fastidious that you were listening back to your scales.
No, I think what I had...
You taped your scales. I love that. Thank God. Wish I could have done that in the piano.
Oh, I had the most rich musical environment at home. My dad would have played games with us. It was omnipresent. So, like, we had the Cellissimo Festival was on last week in Galway, and we had the pleasure of hearing all of the Bach cello suites. I know those inside out because my dad would put on a tape in the car, and he'd actually stop the tape and the two of us would continue singing it. It was a giggle. It wasn't a test.
Where was home?
Northern Ireland, Portrush.
Where's that?
Right up the top coast. So I was born in Belfast, and then 1977 we moved up to get out of the troubles. We were outside Belfast, and we moved to a little seaside village that is just the most beautiful place.
And did that insulate you from the troubles?
It did, but we had a very mixed. Like, I did Irish dancing. I did do some trad as a kid. My dad is a ballad, like his PhD in ballads at this stage of the game. There was Len Graham in our house. There was Andy Irvine in our house. It was incredibly rich. So I think I had a very usual but unusual background. I went to a predominantly Protestant school for about 5 years. And then because of the music teacher, I went to an entirely Catholic convent school for the last 2 years. So it was very ecumenical. Both my parents were involved in the integrated primary school system. So a very balanced approach. And many of, the friends that I have are all musicians. That's like, we're going up to Rathlin for 50th in June, and it's all the kids I played in orchestra with. We had a lot of music. I'd summer camps as well, and those ones I think are the multiplier. That when you do something for 5 days, and particularly if you're residential, you can progress about a year's worth in the 5 days, just based on multiply the hours that you're playing.
Yeah, it's like going to the Willie Clancy Summer School and playing 8-hour sessions every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or 14 hours.
Yeah.
Breaking yourself.
I was trying to be nice.
10 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock sort of thing.
But truly, because you get your 10,000 hours in the week.
Yes.
That kind of repetition.
Absolutely. Right? So it was, there was a very important week that it was the Belfast Recorder and Early Music Society, which sounds very posh.
That's terrible. What are you talking about?
it was beautiful. It was Keith and Katherine Rogers. Their 4 kids were about the same age as me. I walked in knowing nobody at 11. It was conducted in Carnlough, which again, beautiful area on the coast. And because those 4 girls called Keith and Katherine Daddy and Mummy, the 40 of us called Keith and Katherine Daddy and Mummy. And we used to go, the morning was one person to a part playing. They'd pop us into little chamber ensembles, and your sight reading ended up gobsmackingly good. You were paying one person to a part, you're not piggybacking. You either got it, but their secret was their repertoire was so well picked. So they knew what we could do. Then you had a guy called David Crooks, and Keith was a recorder maker and a great composer. David Crooks, fantastic, gritty compositions, but it was for band. So band could be me on violin, somebody had a trombone, we might have had a cornet, like the old-fashioned, we could have singing. So I'd learnt Leonard Cohen, we'd have done the Beatles, but we did fresh compositions that were written for us, that were gritty. So you didn't have this concept of music being soporific. You had, let's put a cow horn into this one. Let's, you haven't played treble recorder yet. Would you like to do that this week? Sure, different fingering system. But sure, I'll try it. By Friday, you were fluent. And just a lot of music. lots and lots of different genres. We did a project, this is nuts, for the university in Jerusalem, in which David Crooks was working out a system by which the Psalms, so each Hebrew letter in the Psalms, was representative of a note within a 3-instrument bank. So you had a psaltery, a lyre, and a harp, which we made, and had bone plectrums that we made. I remember the smell of them. Jesus. Okay, I've still got it. And within this stringing system of these, if you played string number 4 on each of them, you got harmony. And he transcribed them and we recorded it. It was nuts. Like a bunch of 12-year-olds.
Yeah. But that sounds incredibly, what would you
nerdy?
say? Well, no. But as an experience, like completely blasting limitations and boundaries.
We sight sung Bach chorales for grace.
Yeah.
Nobody told us we couldn't. The kids that had perfect pitch, it drove them nuts because they just pick a note out of the sky and it was like, that's not, I'm reading an A, we're singing a G, stop it.
Yeah.
It was we were normal kids or typical kids that they got to do entirely atypical stuff.
Brilliant teachers, brilliant people. Clearly.
Brilliant people.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I agree with the word teaching.
Okay, well, I mean, in the context of what you're talking about, I understand what you mean. And I would agree.
Educators.
Yeah. You see, my experience of classical music was the 3 pieces and nothing else. And so I had a very difficult relationship with the piano and with the strictures, set down within the whole thing. And then, being second son to a really dedicated and brilliant classical piano player, I was the constant disappointment when it came to classical music. But then when it came to Irish music, and particularly, and I believe this is the reason I selected the banjo, I chose it, is because it had no boundaries. It was the rebel instrument that didn't really fully belong in the tradition anyway. It does now, but at the time it didn't. And so I was immediately just blasting boundaries. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And like that, I never had to practice, as in sit down and be made to practice. I loved it. And then I had that wonderful teacher, Septa Byrne, that you know. Mm-hmm. And she was an educator. So we were playing, a traditional version of the Trout. I can't even remember who wrote that. Schubert. On banjos and mandolins and whistles and stuff. So it was a similar experience in a smaller fashion. But it was that idea of opening your mind to all the wonderful things that you could do, which was the complete opposite to you have to practice your Scarlatti 15 times.
Okay, so what you've actually just described is creating an environment.
Correct.
So when that parent comes to us and says, I want to enroll these 3 kids, and we say, I'd love to have your eldest one for a year first. What we talk to them about is when we look at the musicians in our world and the 42 people that I get to work with on a weekly basis, and we talk all the time. And we did a meeting on one occasion and I said, why are we musicians? Like, just let's talk about this for a minute. It's not this staff meeting that you go, this is the fire exit. We do lovely staff meetings that you go, why are we musicians? And it transpired, like with Peter Joyce on team at the time, and you're going, like he's in the Vienna Conservatoire conducting now. I said it was just rich in the house. It didn't, there was no pattern of, like, we Germans and we people from 4 different continents. The only thing that was common was that one of our parents loved music, and hence there was loads of music in the house, not live. It didn't need to be live. It was just on the radio, but it was good quality. Like, it could be good quality rock and roll. It could be good quality classical. It could be good quality traditional jazz. So there was a critical thinking with the music that you were listening to. But it was omnipresent. So it would drive my mum nuts. My dad would go shopping on a Saturday morning, and he'd reverse the car into the driveway, and the frozen stuff is in the back of the car. And he's sitting there, and we're looking at him and going, is he going to get out of the car? No, he was waiting for the piece to finish. It was a massive respect. I remember driving with him as a sort of 20-year-old, and Martin Hayes' first solo album had come out before the Randall Bays one, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
He made us giggle with his variations and laugh, and driving through the Barnesmore Gap in Donegal and stopping the car to listen to it properly. You know, and you just went, that priority put on, and a rich environment in which it was fun and it was light, you know, and how much, like, if you put on music in your house, how much does it change the atmosphere in your house? It's massive. You know, so we can create this environment. And it's like when you look and go, there's a family of doctors and all their children are doctors. Why is that then? You know?
Yeah.
Because it was normalised. Because you're talking about things that become relevant to your kids. Engineers, teachers, nurses. You know, it's not that, it's not, I hate this expression, rocket science.
Rocket scientists.
I know, they make rocket science. You know, you have somebody with a mathematical bent. We create our environment for our children. We can consciously do it. It's not by luck. You know? So if you want this wonderful thing for your kids, then create a musical environment. But I'm not so concerned about creating musicians. It's about stable, resilient people.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to teach a load of banjo, one-to-one lessons, as so many did in their 20s, you know. And so many lessons would turn into kind of semi-counselling sessions for which I was completely unqualified.
Oh, yeah.
With teenagers who were like, I really don't like the banjo. You know, I went out to one mother one time, I said, will you just let him play hurling? Because it's what you know.
Don't.
Would I ever tell my favourite?
One student, okay, a lovely fiddler, with the same name as yourself, okay, first name as yourself, and I apologise to his mother now, who, when I was in my 20s, I actually went out to the car and said, I can't teach this guy. Okay, the object of that sentence is I couldn't teach him because he was a musician. I just couldn't work it out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know enough at the time to work out. And I'm eternally sorry. There is no child that you can't teach.
But they need to want it on some level. They have to have an interest.
We need to create an environment in which they want it.
But if the environment has already been created where they're fulfilling a parental desire, surely no amount of education is going to resist the resistance.
Go back to the thing of the child talking. All children want to talk.
Yeah.
Right, so we can create an environment in which our children want to talk. We can create an environment in which our children want to play music, or they want to play hurling.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not arguing. Probably my favorite story was a mother. And the quote was on my doorstep, and I've never forgotten it. She said, "It's the most Irish thing ever. You seem to get more out of praising them than I do out of baiting them."
There we go.
And that was a real kind of eye-opening moment for me, but it explained an awful lot.
You know? Jane Elliott did an experiment. I think we've talked about this. In the 60s, it was about race relations. And she walked into a primary school, about 9-10-year-olds, and she took over the class for the week. And on the Monday morning, she walked in and said, I have been observing on the way into the school. It's quite clear to me that the blue-eyed kids are far superior than the brown-eyed kids. And she, essentially gives them a sticker, lets them sit up the front. The brown-eyed kids get 5 minutes less at recess and aren't allowed to drink out of a particular tap. That's got connotations and strong ones. And then on Wednesday, she walks in and goes, I was totally wrong. And it's weird now because the brown-eyed kids actually really relish taking the place of the blue-eyed kids. It was like there's another experiment in there. But throughout that week, they tested the kids on speed of reading things that they should be able to do. They were twice as long when they were at the back of the class. And when they interviewed the kids 20 years later and asked them what was going on, they described it as having a steel cap over their brain. So when you put a child in a situation in which they feel uncomfortable or they feel that the teacher doesn't like them, which is very powerful, children's progress slows. They can't think straight, and we create anxiety. And when you're anxious, you can't think. We all know it when we lose our keys in the morning and we've got a meeting to go to, and we do this slight hissy fit, when really if we were just calm, we'd find the keys. We create an environment in which children can be listened to, heard, which is different, respected, not expected to be a trained diplomat. So listen to what they say, not how they say it. So if a child says, I don't understand, you haven't done your job as a teacher. Oh, darling, I'm sorry. Give me a second to think. Okay, let's try it this way. I remember doing lovely orchestra a couple of years ago, and I had shown them, I wanted them to get louder in a particular section, and I'd said, when I do this, what's this small, what's this big, excellent, okay, how do we do it? Well, you have to ascribe meaning to the movement that you're doing, otherwise it's just freaking waving your arms around. So so we know what I want from this, or if I do, if I lean in or whatever you want me to do. And I'd shown them how on their instruments to do it. So how do we get louder? We use more weight, okay? We don't push. That's not a good idea. We use more weight here. You can use bigger bow. Yes, the amount of bow. This speed of bow. And then we talk about placement. Where are you? Close to the bridge. Where's the resonance going to come from? So we've done all of this. And we've actually played the 4 bars, and they've gone from, and we've labelled dynamics. We've done, okay, well, let's do 100. Let's do 1, and then we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Next rehearsal, I start yelling at them. We come to these 4 bars, they do nothing. And I say, would you do a crescendo? Like, come on, lads. And lovely kid Panache turns around and goes, what's crescendo? Sorry. Oops. Didn't teach it.
So, change of pace.
Go on.
So, first time I met you.
Oh,
first time I remember meeting you.
Right, go on.
So we've obviously a remarkable fascination with being an educator and with kids. And we could talk about this all day, and this is fascinating to me. I've most recently, I was a fastidious technician, and I thought that I could cure all banjo ills. This is me going on a tangent to the tangent, just to be clear.
On.
I thought I could cure all banjo ills with enough emphasis on technique. And what I realized is that technique is important until it's not. But that being a dynamic source of energy for a student at any age is a much greater resource than being absolutely fastidious about the picking technique or the banjo hold technique.
It's fair, yeah.
So I've started, and it was a kind of an experimentative thing, because anyway, so I've just started to bring way more dynamism, is that the word? And I don't do very much one-to-one lessons. But I've seen remarkable response to that. And I think that's exactly what you're speaking about, which is that you see the person as a whole and you create an environment where they're excited or they're enthused or they're inspired to want to try
welcomed
things.
Into the room. Lovely to see you.
But also to be allowed to make mistakes.
This is big. We do a sort of training session when kids are coming into the orchestra that I actually probably make a mistake on purpose and then go, whoops, sorry, did anything happen? No. Does it matter? No. Did we learn something? Yep. Okay, make all your mistakes in this room. Great place to make mistakes. It's very important. You were saying something there, and it really is something when we're doing the teacher initial training with parents. So we have a kid in the room, we have a teacher in the room, but we also have the parent in the room, and that's compulsory up to age 12, 13 within the school. we talked to the parents about, how do you do this? It's 2 adults and 1 child. And actually this sort of triangle, firstly, if there's one person, like if the parent walks in and goes, she didn't practice for me this week, I'll round on the parent and go, why not? Let's talk about that, because she's lovely. So I'll back the kid so that we'll never end up with 2 people getting at one person. That's bullying, actually. And in general, we ask the parent, would you mind just being quiet and taking notes? But I had this circumstance. My youngest son was taught by a fantastic cellist, Peter Sebastian, and I'm sitting looking at Cormac, who has a double jointed thumb. So we've been working the bow hold for 3 weeks, and so I'm nearly spitting at the child. I'm so sorry, Cormac. Thumb, right? And Peter rounds on me and went, stop it. I'm not working on his thumb, I'm working on his feet. And Peter decided, stop nagging. We've said to Cormac, he knows that he's meant to do this, and it's just defaulting. Leave him alone. Don't get at a child. You don't get anything out of a child when you're bullying them like that. And we've got to balance as a music educator when we decide to do technique and when we actually back off and be nice.
So what feet work is needed for a cello player? I mean, isn't it all this? So it's he who makes cello shapes.
Okay, can you play the banjo without your feet in the ground?
I have one lady who sends me videos and she sits in perfect lotus position with the banjo.
That's
awesome.
Absolutely perfect.
They're still on the ground.
Well, but you've got your sitting bones.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to put your sitting bones, but it's this. You need to have your balls and your heels of your feet on the floor.
Right. I know, I agree.
Yeah, but if you have a favourite when you walk into a pub, okay, and we played in carols. I have a favourite still in carols.
Okay.
I go search for it because it's the right height for me. Other than that, I'll put my violin case underneath my feet. I need my feet.
Yes. I raise one leg and I bring a footstool sometimes.
Yeah.
Like an old fella.
We play from our feet up.
Okay. And so, in that session, is he focusing on what's happening in the... Is he going...
There's such fun things you can do. Jack in the Box. So when I say that in orchestra, everybody stands up and then I say to them, they're too slow. I'm old and slow and you're young and fast. And I was faster than you. Back in your box. Okay, but it means they can't get up fast if they're serpent legs.
Okay.
They're not balanced. So you just make a game out of it. If I do with my feet, the kids will do it. Like stomp, like the guy.
Power.
A magic finger. Yeah. It's more about creating things that they will... You don't fix a child. The child's not broken. Benedetta used the word reset. Walk away from the instrument and reset it. Don't fix. Like fixing is niggly. Mm-hmm. Put that finger 1 inch or 1 millimeter further up. Put the bow down. Teach them a bow hold again. Draw lines across or draw dots or do a rabbit or whatever you're doing, But you reset and you set a habit. You don't fix a bad one. That doesn't work.
Are you constantly learning more about teaching? Oh God,
yeah.
Where do you source your... do you read about it? Do you train?
I think I talk. I did do a lot of reading during that Suzuki training, which took 17 years to complete, because of children and things like that. Like talking to other parents, talking to kids, listening to kids will teach you how to teach. You can see, what I very much like about kids is that you can see in their face when they are happy. You can see in their face when they're slightly uncomfortable. You can see a colour coming up if they're being made uncomfortable, and they're being made uncomfortable. They weren't uncomfortable when they walked into the room. So the psychology or it's an individual within a group setting fascinates me. How do you mind? Like I used to think if you minded all the individuals in the group, then the group would mind itself. And then I had this funny one about 6 years ago. I had this absolutely cracking bunch of about 12 kids within the context of 50 kids. And those 12 became a clique. And it's not healthy. It's not a nice environment to be in. And the only way to get rid of a clique is actually feed it. You can't break it apart. You can just put more interesting people into it. And then it's, okay, now we've got an egalitarian society in which everybody will talk to everybody else. And that's the glue that forms the group. So
this is so different to what we understand as the education system in Ireland. Because you imagine a scenario in a classroom where you have a clique.
I'm going to seize.
And, and the principal is brought in and the teacher's brought in. We've got to bust this clique.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. How did you know? Is it just experimentation, observation? You're clearly very present when you're teaching.
My second son had a bunch of friends that wouldn't have been as salubrious as we would have liked. Okay. And I remember my dad is both my parents are exceptional observers and educators. I phoned my dad and he said, get them out to have a meal in the house. And I was going, Dad. And he went, okay. So I did, right? But I didn't cook for them. I sat with these sort of group of 10 lads, about 15, 16-year-olds, and I handed them an onion, okay? And this is, just chop that this way. You end up with a 15-year-old who's as bold as brass in school, tears coming down his chin, okay? You hand a kid a pepper, and my son Dara's watching and going, Jesus, this kid hasn't seen one end of a pepper from, he wouldn't know a pepper. And we used to make fajitas. So it's onions, peppers, chicken. I'd make sure they didn't poison each other. And we would sit, but I'd get the kids' names. I'd get a conversation going because our hands are busy. So it's like doing sex education in the car. The child can't get out of the car. You've got something else going on. And then you'd sit down. So we called it Friday Night Dinner Club. And we have a thing in the house that before you start dinner, because of 4 sons, you had to make sure everybody was at the table. Grab hands and it's like Katharine Baker, I stole it from. And she goes, have a nice meal. Okay, the people and initiates go, oh my God, what's going on here? But they all sat down. The conversation around the table was excellent. They said, I don't understand why we don't do this at home. I eat in my bedroom. This is lovely. But it wasn't based on the fact that they were all sitting around together. It's based on the fact they'd cooked it. And then we had a big garden at the time, and they went down into this 10-man teepee and probably drank beer, and the rule was, please don't puke inside the tent. Okay, out you go. But I got to know those kids. I got to see what Dara saw in them, and then as the time progressed, Dara got to see that actually, maybe not. Because he would start seeing the people through our eyes and go, okay, my judgment system hasn't been, he was being a bit of a moth. There's a party over here. Look at the light, instead of actually really looking at that light is going to lead you down this line, darling. Pull them in, pull your kids in, spend as much time with them as possible.
You had a baby literally strapped to your chest for quite a period of time when I met you first. And this is what just wanted to...
Baby has just had babies.
Yeah. So go back to, so we're talking mid-90s.
We're talking,
you
know me.
Okay,
so that baby is now 31. Myself and my husband, he got transferred down to Galway. I had a job in Dublin, was on maternity leave. So that's about £60 a week. My husband was trying to set up a particular branch and he was on commission. And we're talking about the early 90s in the west of Ireland. No money. So I remember sitting in his office in Prospect Hill and going, we don't have the rent. We literally didn't have the rent. And I went, okay, fine. And I busked in Dublin before I got married. And I went, okay. And I went up to Dunn's stores just outside where the pathway that was up to Roach's stores. And I'm feeling porrick, so it's not a case of let's put him in we'll just bring him with me and see how long it lasts. And I had one piece that I remembered because I hadn't played violin for about 2 years. I could play the second violin part of the Bach double. Just a ridiculous thing to do. And I played it for an hour and I made £60. Now that was unusual, and I never made that amount again. It was novelty factor going on.
That was a car.
It was, yeah. It was a definitely novelty factor. And I remember going back with, like, I had a scarf with, like, Robin Hood or something, going back into the office and going, the rent was £60. We've got it. Okay. And Porrick was the most amazingly compliant baby. So I'd sort of rock him like this in the eyes, like I was sort of hypnotising him to sleep, and go, you're there for 2 hours, son. Okay, you stay put. And I don't know whether the music was helping or whatever it was, or like snuggled in as well, very holistic. And I did it. Dara arrived 13 months later. I discovered busking with 2 babies doesn't work. Very quickly, it didn't. And Dara wasn't the same sort of baby at all. But it sustained us through that year. And I did it like a job. So we were living in Athenry. We would drive in the morning. I would do Buttermilk Lane from 10 until 12. I'd go and feed Porrick, and I'd probably do 1 to 3 or 2 to 4. And then I'd go home 5 days a week. That was my job. But it was great practice. Did I practice? Yes. I busked for a year.
Yeah, 4 hours a day.
Yeah. And I discovered various things. Classical gets much more than traditional. There's a whole atmosphere in Ireland of, but sure, my granny played that, or that's not my music really, or that's like the 90s was a shift. We'd already had this shift really. I remember Tom Cousins saying to me, he was shouted out of a pub in the 60s in Aughrim going, you're playing tinker music. Interesting.
Yeah.
How it's become now, and but there was far more respect for somebody who could play trad, or for classical, than trad, which is not fair. And I remember doing an experiment race week and the week before it, and I obviously had enough money to do the experiment. I did trad on a Monday, classical on a Tuesday, and alternated the next week to do as controlled an experiment as I could. Okay, the take was half.
Playing trad.
For trad. Now, that said, I wasn't a very good trad player, so that might have had something to do with it. But eye contact, there's, like, Buttermilk Lane is perfect because you've got enough of a distance from both sides for them to see you, hear you, smile at you, or I smile at them, eye contact, get their hand into their pocket and get their hand back out of their pocket, and they're past you. Okay, it's a perfect pitch, and it's perfect for one person.
Yeah. Was there a whole kind of turf situation with regard to busking? Was that all organised?
Oh, it was lovely. It was sort of like an unofficial corporation that if you arrive first, that's like the pitch is free, and like Anthony McGrath would come up to me at 11:30 and go, "Can I have it next?" So you wouldn't stay indefinitely in a pitch.
Yeah.
You'd stay sort of maximum 2 hours because there was a respect for this needs to circulate, And maybe Anthony would say, listen, I'll take it from 12 to 2. And I said, can I have it back at 2 o'clock? And there would be, like, by the time I got there at 2 o'clock, it was like, okay, Pete's going to take over at 4. There was a lovely corporation. There wasn't the crazy amplification that we have now. Yeah, there's the amplification doesn't serve everybody. Like, you've got a sound wave up to the next pitch. And if your sound is encroaching in another pitch, or,
Do you look back fondly on those times? I assume it was tough, like in
it
one
was
sense.
tough. People didn't understand that I actually needed the money, so I think they thought I was a real wee hippie, when actually I was quite ashamed. I didn't really want people to spot me or see me, so I got quite a lot of criticism at the time. I'm going to make that child deaf. I'm going to make the child bandy-legged. That sort of thing. I had a remarkable experience from it, that a lady called Eileen O'Donoghue, she came to the door in Athenry, and at the time, so Porrick was small, and we had 2 big dogs, the house, like small baby, 2 dogs, you can imagine the house, okay? And I thought, oh God, somebody's actually found where I live. It's opening to this very well presented lady, and I thought, God, she's going to give me an earful. And she said, I think you're magic. I'd love you to teach my daughter. I went, what? That was Helen O'Donoghue, who then ended up teaching in the school. 10, 14 years later. But she really turned my life around. So I did start teaching, just private practice. And then Brian, my husband, died in 96. And wow. Eileen sat me down in 97, actually coincidentally, just outside the train station in Athenry, and said, "What are you going to do?" I went, And she said, I said, I think I'd quite like to set up a school, And she said, well, you'd need to have a qualification to do that, because I didn't even have a leaving cert. I'd left school at 17 because of being probably undiagnosed dyslexic and being a moss. So I sort of get teenagers when they start going from quite high achieving to, okay, Gary, you've lost your way, have you? I like those kids.
Yeah.
Because somebody could have pulled me back if they'd got it right, or maybe they couldn't. That's my pathway. So she actually drove me to Mághnuis, because we'd looked around the music colleges and went, okay, you've 2 small kids, you can't go now, like it's a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, you're going to have to wait. We decided 6 and 7 was perfect. Jesus. Anyway, went to Mághnuis and discovered you'd have to do another subject. And she said, well, what other subject would you do? And I said, I was always good at mathematics. And we went and talked to Athenry who's the mathematics professor there. I don't know how we got a meeting with him. And he said, oh, and when was your more recent experience of mathematics? And it's like 1988. So Eileen happened to be a mathematics teacher, and she came to my house every Wednesday lunchtime for 2 years and taught me the Leaving Cert syllabus.
Wow.
And I sat the Leaving Cert and I got an A1. She was brilliant. She did the most amazing method. Okay, the way when you do schoolwork and your explanations are in the same book as your exercises, and when you get to practice exams, you can't find your explanations. She did A5 hardback notebook, explanations only, indexed. You want to know how to do differentiation? Go to page 17, because it says it in the index. I've never lent these books to anybody apart from one very cool kid who's doing her Leaving Cert at the moment, who was a student of mine for 10 years, and I actually gave her the books. They're still there. But it's just exceptional. It taught me a lot about how to study in college. But I was 28 going.
And so you did college?
Yeah.
In Mághnuis?
Yep. Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable
Great
story.
times.
How many kids do you have now?
4.
So you did you remarry?
I remarried.
What happened, Brian?
Brian had cancer.
Oh God.
So I remarried and divorced.
All right.
Sorry, guys. But we get on well and 2 lovely kids. So Porrick's a nurse, Dara's a musician. I told them not to do that. Rory's just gone into the army at 19, and Cormac is doing his Leaving Cert. And I've got 2 grandbabies.
That's when you told me that, I was like, that's not even chronologically possible. What?
Porrick is 31. It's entirely possible. They're beautiful, Cuiva and Aving.
Yeah.
So living in Headford.
Oh, so close as well.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. But it's a real start of an era. I'm having a bit of I don't know whether I'm having a crisis or what. It's Cormac in Leaving Cert. And when you have small children, you know what it feels like. It's like, this is endless. It's just going on and on. And I remember mum phoning me when I had Cormac, and there's 14 years between Porrick, and she went, do you realise you're going to do 28 years of school runs? What? It's 3 decades nearly of school runs. And I'm coming to my last school runs. And and particularly with Rory going into the army, and you can't see somebody regularly, like you don't get to do a Friday dinner club with all my kids. And it's just a bit of an end of an era, and then the start of another one with the twin girls. And I've no experience of girls within a nuclear family, so it's like, how's that going to work? I don't know.
It's an amazing life.
Isn't it?
Isn't it?
Rich and varied, not bored.
When you were busking in Buttermilk Lane with a baby, and could you have ever imagined how things would have wove their way to a 500 student music school and
No way. I don't think I took myself seriously, never mind anybody else taking me seriously. No.
What's your last question? This is for me. Your best piece of advice for somebody that teaches music, not necessarily to kids, but just in general, as a music teacher.
Be kind. Be nice.
That's great advice.
Expectations, get rid of them. Work out the way that person will learn. And like I've had adult students, and like she said, I want to do vibrato, and you look at her list and it's clamped like a duck's bottom, and I'm thinking, no, you don't. You don't really want to do vibrato, because I'm going to have to do this, and you don't want to do that. And it's working around what I think teaching an adult or teaching a 3-year-old really teaches you how to teach. Or teaching a child that takes 7 years to do what a typical child would do in 1. That teaches you how to teach. But with kindness. All the time.
So is there a website for Athenry School of Music?
AthenryMusicSchool.com.
And do you do international lessons online?
We do. Yeah, we didn't mean to. Most of the things that we do, we didn't mean to. We've about 5 teachers who worked with us in Athenry and were physically present, and then moved abroad, and their students didn't want to leave them. So we've got a teacher in France, we have a teacher in Budapest, we have a teacher in Berlin, we have a teacher in London, and I teach a couple of Tasmanians who came to Galway and played in the mega concert recently, which is very cool.
Yeah. Katharine has been wonderful. I know we could go for hours.
It's grand.
So much.
Knowing when to stop is also a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're very welcome.